What's up, everybody? It's Heat Override, and I'm ready to bring the pain for you this week on another special episode of Bring the Music. I have a gentleman on today that I have followed for all of my life. I found him through one of my passions in life, which is video games. And when I reached out to him and he said he was glad to come on, I couldn't have thought of a better way to do it. I had to use my old school background music because the last time I did a Bring the Music, it was an Elite Force takeover. I want to bring him in right now.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good. How you doing, Simon? It's great to see you.
I'm doing really well, man. Really well. Thanks for
That's
having me
good.
on.
Thank you, and you're welcome. So for everybody that doesn't know or may not follow the electronica era, electronic music, dance, deep core, whatever you want to call it, EDM, try not to use that term too often, but Simon was part of a group called Elite Force, and that is where I first met him, as I was referring to earlier. Two of my favorite artists of all time, both Lunatic Calm and White Zombie / Rob Zombie, I learned through video games, and that was Way of the Warrior for White Zombie, and it was Need for Speed 4 High Stakes for Simon. Simon, thank you to Bring Your Pain. It's an honor to have you on. So tell us about it. You started out as Mr. Headless Chickens. You had Flicker Noise in there. You jumped over to Lunatic Calm. Then you disappeared like incognito, like Macho Man. Ooh, yeah. And you went with the Zodiac Cartel, huh? Yeah. Then you came back out and Elite Force, and then straight into I'm going to be Simon Shackleton, and I'm going to take music, challenge myself, and go to the next level.
Yeah, that roughly sums things up. I guess if you've been around for as long as I have making music, you're going to kind of rack up all these different projects along the way. I started out, I guess, like late 80s. I started out as I was a real metalhead back then, and then I kind of gravitated from metal to sort of industrial music. Acid house was my kind of gateway drug into electronic music, and that's also when I started DJing in the very late 80s, early 90s. And those initial DJ sets I did were 5 hours long. They were super eclectic, and I didn't own any decks. So my first, it was a real baptism of fire. And my first show was to 1,200 people. Kind of learnt on the job, bought a ton of vinyl with me, and I've always been a real kind of musical magpie. You know, I don't really see myself belonging to any one specific genre, but I've always just been super kind of curious, and I just like to absorb as much music as I can, to be honest.
I agree with that. That's actually that's what led me to you, not only through that, but as I brought up with DJ Magic Mike, finding him in the late 80s, early 90s, and then he kind of opening my friends and our minds to how he was able to use the scratching of the records to talk, and a lot of different songs, just being able to use the bass and Discord chords and everything that he's been able to produce, and then everything he's been affiliated to, everything from Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back, to all of the other stuff. He kind of started it, but it was also Bobby Brown and Rob Zombie, who I'm going to say, when he would always remix his albums, Bobby Brown the same way, remixes in the key of B. I mean, if you wanted On Our Own from Bobby Brown back then, you had to get that. And I wanted Bobby Brown. That was my thing. And that was my step away from metal. I was into Metallica. I was into Motley Crue. One of my first tapes I ever owned was Shout at the Devil. And for me, that was part of growing up, and then kind of expanding my horizons, going into that kind of venue, and then Mike kind of opening it up, and then video games leading into with Rob Zombie. And you said the industrial sound that he was able to get, in the Astro Creep 2000, when he did Super Sexy Swinging Sounds, the remix to that, and added a lot of real industrial kind of electronic air elements to his music. it was music I could play in my deck, and it was a CD after a CD that would occupy that deck for at least 3-4 years because I was able to use that in that. And for me, that is what you get. You should never be able in one lane. You should just be like, I don't like this. I think that evolution really helps, and I think that that's where a lot of your music, because that's what led me to you when I first heard Roll the Dice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I just think from a creative point of view, as an artist, you're looking to express all these different sort of feelings, emotions, experiences that you've had in your life through music, and you're looking to kind of soundtrack those in some shape or form, which is something I've always done. But to deny yourself the more maybe extreme ends of that self-expression, and I'm talking musically speaking here, why I feel like a lot of the time, especially these days, I think for a lot of artists, where they pitch themselves musically and where they limit themselves musically is a lot to do with marketing, maybe, rather than the desire that they have to express themselves. And I think that's a real shame. I think in the 80s and 90s, I don't feel like genres were particularly well sort of formed, as well formed as they are these days, and as kind of niche and as tribal as they are these days. People really like to stick to their super kind of niche. And I feel back then when I first started DJing, I wasn't called a breakbeat DJ, even though I played quite a lot of breaks in my sets, but I was known as an eclectic DJ, and that was the term that was given to people like me who didn't want to choose a lane and really wanted to take people on a bit of a journey. And I guess one way or another, I've stuck to that throughout my career as a musician and as a DJ. Really, it's there's a whole universe of expression out there, and why limit yourself?
I agree with that. So when you bring that, it's almost like, and through your career, you could almost even map it where you're like at the top, you're going up towards like a pyramid top to say, let's say Lunatic Calm might have been that next step into that next level where you were at the top. Now it's like you're like a Jedi where you've learned all your skills and you've now you want to go on a journey. You want to challenge yourself, because if you don't challenge yourself, it's the same way with like my podcast. If I don't challenge myself, if I don't change things up, if I don't use different formats, this is the first time I've used StreamYard in a long time. Right. But at the same time, it's about that expertise that comes behind that kind of gives you that confidence to be able to step into things. And you had that confidence going in towards the Shadowmaker. But of course, the one thing that I had a problem with, and that we had a problem with living in Erie, Pennsylvania, was that our music was limited. So I ran across your first CD, of course, Metropole. And that was, of course, after the Need for Speed 4, and I heard it. And just the way the game presented, I was doing computers, and the first song that came on the first board, because I had the graphics, it just came in swooping in, and it had the nice little things that had gotten to my cockpit, and it had the whole beginning to Roll Your Dice. In the minute, it was like red, yellow, green hits with that freaking drop. And I just it set my fucking mind into another level. I was like, what the hell is this shit? And I was like, it just set me over the level. So then I never actually, like, Breaking Point wasn't sold anywhere in Erie. Even like West Coast music was locked down. So to get Spice One music, I would go to only place that carried it was Media Play. They didn't have that. So one day I was looking for a Breaking Point, the movie, and Breaking Point pops up, and it says Breaking Point Lunatic Calm. And I was like, this can't be. So I clicked on it, and it downloaded it, and it downloaded the whole. So I'm sorry.
But no. It's, standard.
At the time, and I downloaded it. I still have that file to this day. Wow. It is how I've always had Breaking Point, and it's always had Metropole. Both of those CDs have practically took me over through those years, because Mike went in kind of like a slow phase too. But at that point, it was like you and Mike, and that was really it. So talk about that. What was the thing with the Breaking Point CD that the aura to it? Was it just not released on release, or?
Oh man, well we had all kinds of really tedious record company issues, right? So for those who aren't aware, what we're talking about here are the two Lunatic Calm albums. So the first one was Metropole. That was released in '97, and actually we had a big falling out with our UK record company, which was MCA Music.
Mhm.
And it's a classic major label thing where we'd signed a deal with a major label. We made the album ourselves. We didn't go into a studio or anything. We bought some equipment from our record deal, and we basically figured out how to use it. And that album was what came out. It was literally the first stuff that came out.
Mhm.
And so we had this, everything was going fine. The record label, like, we love your stuff. We had Fatboy Slim do a remix on Roll the Dice, which was our first single, which was awesome. And actually he approached us because he'd heard some of our music, and he said, "Do you mind if I remix it?" And we were kind of, no, go ahead. 'Cause he was like the biggest electronic artist in the world pretty much at the time.
Yeah, him or Moby, but
Yeah,
it
right.
was really Fatboy Slim, Moby. If you were thinking, like, nobody knew about Tiesto or anybody back then, even though they may have been around, it was really those two guys and maybe the Crystal Method. Those were the three.
Yeah. Certainly in the US, I'd say, outside of the US, I would say probably the Prodigy, Chemical Brothers,
Yep.
Underworld, Left Field. They were all big outside of the US. And I first started coming out to the US and DJing in '97, and it was really interesting coming out because people just didn't know the music at all. It was like a foreign language. But anyway, so we had this big falling out with the record company where we were about 3 weeks before the release of the album. We had Leave You Far Behind coming out that week as a single, and they really wanted to get into the top 40 charts, right? And for us, it wasn't commercial music by any means. It was just a noisy electronic punk track that we just knocked out. And and at the time, we were like, this was midweek, and the midweek like charts were coming back, and we were placed at about number 60, which was we were really impressed by this. Yeah, and they said, no, you've got to, if you don't crack the top 40, it's all of our investment's going to be wasted. And we were like, well, that's a bit harsh. And they said, well, anyway, we've got this advert that a drinks company had made, and in the advert, it basically ripped the piss out of the Prodigy and Keith Flint specifically. And it had Keith drinking this fizzy drink and then turning mental and smashing up a house or something. And and they used our music for it, and we were kind of, well, this is people are going to think we're arseholes if we're, like, when they see it, they're going to hate, like, they're going to, it's not going to be good for our reputation.
Exactly.
And then they said, well, okay, either you do the advert and agree to it, or we pull the album and the single and you're done with us, basically. What the hell?
Yeah, that's some shit.
I know, so it's crazy. So and people don't really know about this stuff out in the public domain, but I think artists are all, we're always grappling with nonsense like this.
Yeah.
So we had no choice. The advert came out, and then the next week, in all of the music papers in the UK and all the music magazines, there were all these news pieces saying, basically calling us arseholes, and like the Prodigy were just the most loved band in the UK at the time, and everyone was taking the piss out of us, and we had like the main music papers saying, avoid this band at all costs. And
oh man.
And then the record company, it didn't help us get into the top 40. And then the record company sacked the A&R man that signed us and never answered the phone to us again after that. So we were just basically left on our own. So we then, they'd already committed to funding some touring for us as part of our deal. So we went to the US and we worked our asses off out in the US, and we toured with the Crystal Method on 2 or 3 occasions, did big US tours. built a bit of a following up out there, and or out here, and then MCA basically they wouldn't let us out of our contracts, and we were stuck in the contract for about 3 years.
Oh,
And in the meantime, all of that impetus and momentum we built up just started to disappear. And in the meantime, we'd already recorded Breaking Point.
okay.
Like almost immediately after but it as time went by, we'd come back to it and be like, oh, it's not quite right. Let's fiddle around with it. Let's do new versions of the tracks. Eventually we got out the contract, and we got, after, long story short, still a long story.
Hey, that's what podcasts are for, man. People get informed.
So we got out the contracts, and eventually we signed a new contract with City of Angels, who are a big underground dance label based out of LA. But in order to do that deal with them, they had to do a deal with a major to get some funding in, so they could properly get us out on the road and give us the promotions we needed. The week before Breaking Point was due to come out, they folded as like the City of Angels. Basically, there was a load of behind the scenes drama that I can't talk about, but it was hilarious and scandalous, and ridiculous. But it basically meant that the parent company, which was Virgin, had a choice of basically paying us a load of money for being in breach of contract and not putting our album out, or doing the bare minimum under the terms of the contract, which was to release 500 copies of the CD.
Oh.
And so that's what happened, and that's why it never made to, Erie, Pennsylvania, and it never made it anywhere. And we had no tour support, we had no record label support. And so, we'd put so much of our lives into that record, it just there was no coming back from it,
Yeah. I've had the same thing. I mean, I talk, of course, with Mike. He's become like a really close friend, and he's kind of has the same story as you. Kind of, the record labels, they always screwing you over, and then you kind of just find your own way, and you become kind of who you are now, and you see who you are. And that album was just big because both albums together, I only had practically, like I said, in Erie, PA, and because the internet wasn't up to par yet, and we didn't have our devices looking at, and that I didn't have no option other than those 2 CDs. So those 2 CDs practically became life for me. And then finally, eventually, when I found Bandcamp, and through a link or a post or something that you may have posted or something, I found Bandcamp. I found you on there. I was able to start buying your music. And then that's when I bought the singles collection with the 96 to 2005. And then it's the 2006 to 2019. So it kind of caught me up on a lot of the music that I missed during those times, not being able to have access to it. So like Mindframe Wrecker, The Game Changer, Captain America, a lot of that music I was able to learn through that CD. And then, of course, leading into your, the complete unreleased revamped. Holy, I was like, I looked at that, I was like, you got to be shitting me. There's 90 fucking songs on this CD.
It's so ridiculous. So the for people that don't know about the revamped series, I started that in 2008, and at the time, this is all Elite Force we're talking about now, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so in 2008, I was going out and I was DJing all over the world. I was like, I had a really crazy life for about 15 years where Lunatic Calm folded. I formed my own record label. In fact, I had 2 or 3 record labels because I didn't want to go through all the major stuff again. I just wanted to be independent. So anyway, so I started DJing. I'd fly out. I'd play in mainland China, for example, and I'd play there 3 or 4 times a year. And I'd fly on a Thursday night from London overnight, 13-hour flight to Hong Kong. Then I'd do an internal flight to like Shanghai or something in China, do my show, get an early morning flight to Beijing, do a show in Beijing. Sunday morning at 6 a.m, I'll get on another flight back to Hong Kong. and then I'd fly back to the UK, and because of the time difference, I could actually get home in time for my Sunday dinner.
Oh,
And
that's
in
always
the,
nice.
I mean, it was wild. It was like, I was away for 72 hours. I spent 34 of it in the air, flying around.
Oh, geez.
And it was like that. It was kind of like that every weekend. The bookings I was getting were just I was getting to go to some really interesting places. Like I played in eastern Kazakhstan, for example, which not many people get to visit, but it was a really interesting period of time. But because I was DJing so much, I was doing a lot of edits of tracks, always doing edits of tracks. So I had little unique things to play. And then I came up with this idea on one of these long flights of, well, and the way I organized my music, everything was organized in key. And so I had 10,000 bits of music, all meticulously organized in key. So if I wanted to play something in the key of C, for example, I had a choice of like 1,000 tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, well, what if I could take the bass line that's in C from that track and the melody from that track and the string sounds and the vocal and whatever, and just start doing these really crazy mashups that weren't just a remix. They were like a new production piece, but just literally taking or borrowing other people's ideas. And then I started calling these revamps. And then I got my manager at the time we had this crazy idea of like, what if we could make an album of this stuff?
Yeah.
And we sat down and looked at each other and we're like, we'd never get anyone to agree to license it, because it's like, you normally, like, licenses are difficult to get. They're complicated and they're a pain in the ass. And licensing is just when you ask permission for an artist to use something. And usually the manager will come back and they'll say, yeah, it'll cost you 15 grand to use it, or we want 75% of all the royalties. But because we were going to all these labels and artists and saying, we're licensing 7 other tracks that are all going into this weird melting pot of ideas for this. And so a lot of these artists and labels are like, I don't even know how to give you a price for that. And so we'd say, well, just let us have it then, or give us $100. We'll give you $100 for like lifetime usage. And basically everybody we approached said, yeah, sure, that's fine. And so we got all these licenses for very little. And then what people hadn't realized, but what we'd realized, is that when the track came out, like on Beatport, it didn't say Elite Force and then the name of the track. It said Elite Force, Stanton Warriors, The Prodigy, whatever. And they were all tagged as the artists, which meant that everybody that followed each of those artists got it into their inbox, which was just the most amazing kind of marketing deal.
Yeah, that was cool.
And you know what? By the end of the first week, I had on Beatport, out of all of like the global genre charts on Beatport, so for all of the music that was released, every one of those album tracks, all 14 of them, were in the top 50 worldwide. And in the breakbeat chart, I had the top 12 places for an entire month. And these tracks were just going mental. So,
oh, dude,
yeah, that was the story of Revamp. But in the, like going full forward to you discovering it on Bandcamp, where there's like 84 unreleased revamps.
Oh man,
I did multiple albums of those revamps, but I always kept dozens and dozens of tracks for myself. So when I was playing out, people would hear something unique. And really, when I pretty much stopped playing out as Elite Force, I was like, well, let's just let people have them, So
dude, I can tell you, like, when I got that, I was like, holy crap. And then you just like, it's like, just pay anything. And I'm like, I didn't even know, like, I think when I paid for it, it was a UK conversion. So I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I just threw the money down and I got it. In the first song, man, when you came in with some Jimmy Page, I was like, oh, okay. But then I got the Blue Monday and that flipped my damn lid. I was like, holy shit. And then going through all the different mixes of Red. Then you went and you threw 2 of your Elite Force kind of like 15-minute sets. But I'll tell you one song I can literally, and there's only my daughter can relate to me on this one. Nobody in the world other than maybe yourself would know with it. when I go kick snare, I can literally go on the internet and I could go, it's unbelievable. And the only person that'll get that is her. And that song tears your mind apart, puts it back together. And if you're driving, you might get in a race. You gotta watch yourself. That's not it. That song is wild.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Well, you know what? That was the original of that was like a dubstep track, and at the time that I started doing these, dubstep was just starting to really explode. It was starting to get really big, and one of the very first ones of these I did was by Bar 9, and it was their original was called Shaolin Style, and and I I was playing around with it on this flight out to Spain to do a show. And I just was thinking, well, I'm generally making music at sort of 130, 135 beats per minute or something. Dubstep is at 70, but if you double it, then it's 140. So I was like, well, if I just take the snare drums and just move them around and condense the kicks and snares so that they're basically becoming a breaks track, I can literally steal all of this music and just repurpose it very easily. And so I did it. And actually that night when I got to Spain, I'd done this mashup and played it to 5,000 people out there, and it went mental. It was amazing. So
dude.
Yeah, I've got something here. So
dude, I would have I probably had a launch to the moon, seriously, because I'm like a really jacked up kind of dude anyway. And that's kind of like, that's why I like the whole Bring the Pain moniker and things. But man, if I was at a concert and I heard that, man, if I heard like, okay, so even when I was at Charlie's Angels, when I went to, because me and my friends just saw movies, and we were at Charlie's Angels and Leave You Far Behind came on, I almost jumped down my damn seat because I was the only person in that theater that knew what the fuck that song was. Nice. And I was like, fucking man. And I was with my buddy, I was like, Dave. And he's just sitting there. He's the one that kind of gets a lot of my abuse. He's my oldest friend of all time. Like,
awesome.
And so he kind of like he's had to put up with a lot of my craziness and insanity and just flipping and going all these insane. But it was just, that was like that one thing. And now to pass that on and then take those steps with, my daughter, and then talking about the one series and then you playing on boats. I mean, you playing for like 24 hours at times.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, the one series was really interesting. It was a kind of, it was like in 2009, there was a big pivot point for me. And I went to Burning Man for the first time. And I honestly, I went to that festival, really feeling like I knew it all, like I was a regular at Glastonbury. I played at a lot of the big festivals, and I knew, I'd earned my festival stripes. I was a warrior at these things, and I knew what I was doing. And I went out and I had all these friends of mine, like just banging on about it for years, just saying, you've got to go. It's going to change your life. I was like, it's just dusty hippies in the desert. And I'm not bothered. But eventually, somebody, I can't remember who it was. It was a friend of mine who ran one of the biggest sound camps out there, and I played for him regularly. He just said, just come out for a couple of days and we'll put you on our main stage, which was 5,000 people on the night when the man burns. And it just, the whole experience out there, it really changed my perspective on everything, because it was very much a kind of, everybody, like this guy doing this stage, for example, there's no funding for it. None of these big stages out there get a penny from anybody. They raise the money themselves, and then they gift it to the community for a whole week, and they work it, they staff it. It's just, and there's me coming in there having one of the best sets I've ever played to the best crowds I've ever played. And just, just thinking, well, I felt like coming away from that, I can actually give a lot to this community, because I'm all about, like, I love gifting my talents to people, and I love kind of, and that's what it felt like to me. So it wasn't an ego thing, or maybe it was an ego thing to an extent, but it was really like, we're all in this together. And I've always seen myself as a performer and as a DJ as just just a cog in the event, like a quite an essential cog, because without it's not much going on, right? But and so one of the things that I learned when I was going to the various burns, and I went for 7 years straight. But the following year, when I went back, I was like, I want to try. That was amazing last year, but this year I want to try some different stuff as well as the things that I'm known for. And so
Okay.
that year I decided to these friends that did a sunrise event, and I
Mhm.
thought I'll see if I can convince them to let me play. And they jumped at the idea and said, sure, well, come and play. And it was an opportunity just to play some much deeper, more housey, just sunrisey music. And it was really fun for me collecting all of that stuff, because it was like, oh, here, this is a part of me that I haven't really been in touch with for quite a while.
Okay.
And then with each year I went back, those parties kind of grew and grew and grew, the sunrise events. And for
Mhm.
me, they became almost the most important morning of the entire burn. And by the last burn I did, which was 2015, I had
Mhm.
like 1,000 people there for it, which is quite something when everyone's so like ADHD and just like
Yeah.
shiny. So
Yeah, they can't remember what they just saw, like going to SummerSlam or something
that's
and
right.
watching the great, and then they're in their phones and stuff. And yes, you try to do that, and that's where a lot of your newer work, because eventually now we should probably get into what's going on with the Shadowmaker, because that is where the evolution, going back to Lunatic Calm Metropole, the beat evolves. You evolved. You've come down, and now you've, like I said, you have learned all these Jedi moves. You have learned all this meditation. You are now putting it all together for the Shadowmaker, challenging yourself, trying to go dark and deep, cinematic. And so far, you have hit the nail not only on the head, but you drove it through the board and all the way through the concrete, because you smashed that shit. Because I love everything you got going on. And again, we're getting into this, how our lives are ran by these things right here. And that is where the House of Mirrors, and that is where Addicted to Lies, and that is where the Shadowmaker is going, the Smokestack Blues, and then remixing those kind of long beats. And then the way you're explaining it, like, I had this great guitar, and listen to it, this is what it sounds like when I made it before, but I thought that was too aggressive. And then now you're remixing it to the Endless Maze remix of the House of Mirrors. Man, I gotta admit, you're spreading your craft beautifully.
Oh,
And
thanks, man.
what put you here? I know, of course, the journey and everything, but what made you challenge yourself this way?
Oh, that's such a good. It's a really good question. It's been a long time coming. I went through the last 10 years has been really, for one reason or another, it's been really challenging personally. I've gone through a lot of sort of changes.
Yeah.
I separated from my first wife, who I'd been together with for over 20 years, and that was almost a decade ago now. But the fallout from something like that is just massive.
Yes.
I left the farm that we'd bought together, and my dogs and my daughter and everything, and it was a really traumatic time. So there's a lot. I was a bit of a closed book emotionally, and I wouldn't really talk about what was going on in my life at all. And so this stuff was really hard. I went to therapy. I started talking a lot about it, and all of this stuff came out that I just kept bottled up really for all of my life. And then, after a few years had gone by and I started getting my shit back together a bit, I also had this health issue where I've got a tumor on my pituitary gland, which is fine. It's all like, it's perfectly happy as long as it's kind of medicated.
Yeah.
But that also meant I couldn't really go out and push myself DJing like I was doing before. So this sort of big combination of big life changes, like being able to express some of these really difficult sort of subject matters. Like there's one of the tracks on the album which is written about adoption, and I'm adopted, and it's not something that I ever really spoke to anybody about. It's very much like it's no one's business. Do you know what I mean?
No.
But I like I was saying earlier on, music is it's an emotional vehicle, and a lot of the time for me it's been the way that it's my primary vehicle for expressing emotion. And I think if what you're doing is constantly creating music for the dance floor, that's cool. But the dance floor is it's sort of functionally driven. You have
Yeah,
to make people dance. It has to
exactly.
sound good on a system. It has to be something that other DJs can play alongside the other music that they want to play. So I really
Hmm.
was just looking for a much broader, more personal kind of
Yeah.
expression. And and I did, like, to your point about Smokestack Blues, the original of that, I wrote most of the tracks from the Shadowmaker album. I wrote in a big session I did in 2019,
Hmm.
and then I came back to them, did a bit of sort of production work on them in 2020, and then I just sat there listening to this music going, what the fuck have I made? I don't even know what it is. It's so varied,
Yeah.
and it's like industrial mayhem here, and then super emotive ballad here, and all the rest of
Yeah.
it. And it was so confusing to me musically that I didn't know what to do with it. So I just
Hmm.
left it on my hard drive.
Yeah.
For,
Yeah.
it
I know
happens.
what you mean.
Yeah, and I just
I have shows for the podcast I've written down on a piece of paper. The one year it sat there for 1 year, I had to go back and look over it and be like, okay, do I still feel this way?
yeah,
Right.
that's it, man. That's exactly it. And then you start second guessing it. It's like, well, what's my fan base going to make of this? It's just weird
Hmm.
and it's different. But then this year, I had this mentoring session with a friend of mine, Gabe Ratcliffe, here in Denver, and
Hmm.
one of the really kind of hard hitting questions he asked was, how would you feel if you're lying on your deathbed and this music never like made it out into the world? And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
gee, I'd genuinely be gutted. And
Yeah.
so it's like, well, that's inexcusable. Like you can't allow that to, as
No.
an artist, like, what am I
No.
doing here? Like, what use is it on my hard drive? So
Yep.
then I had a kind of, I sat with it for a while, and I thought, well, how can I bring these tracks together with a sound palette and a style that really maintains this sense of real kind of intimacy and the messaging of the music, um,
Mhm.
but also has a more kind of coherent sound through it. So, like
Yeah.
you were saying, I've got a video on my YouTube channel
Yeah.
where I go from original Smokestack Blues to new version, and it is like night and day.
It really
Um,
is. I was
yeah,
digging that guitar, that heavy guitar, man. I was like, because I was sitting there, I was writing up my fantasy rankings for the week, that for the football site, and I'm like sitting there, and I just literally push play at the beginning of your thing, and I just let it all play out, because I was doing my thing and getting in there, and then that popped on, and I'm over here like, man, this is like catching my ear, and I'm like hearing you pop back and forth between it. And when you talk about music, and we'll get back into that too real quick, but talk about music, when my brother passed away earlier this year, the first CD or the first podcast I did was the video game music. And
right,
the video game music for that was, I was pushed by this video game music Discord that I'm in part of. One of the other podcasters in Erie, he goes by the Messenger on a VGM journey. He said, "Hey," and the guys are going, "Look, you made a top 51 Nintendo songs. When are you going to do something else? You keep talking about the Turbo Graphics, the 3DO. You seem to be the only one. Can we get some of this?" And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I started getting back into it, and I really think that being the first episode after his passing, and then when I did his full episode and talked about him, it made it so much easier, because the music already had practically not
right,
it healed me.
yeah,
And for you right now, making the Shadowmaker, when I hear that, I picture me alone in my car driving, deep in thought, positive, negative, doesn't really matter, just knowing that I'm driving,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I hear what you're saying, and it's really good to hear. And I'm sorry to hear about your brother's passing as well.
It happens.
You
Thank
know,
you.
yeah, and I think that the voice for this music, like I said, I really wanted I wanted people's attentions to just be as focused as possible when they're listening to it. And I know we live in this world of kind of smash and grab and attention, like
Yeah.
everything is about attention. And like, you know, I look at my daughter and she's 17, and if you can get her attention for 2 seconds or more, you've done really well.
Yeah.
And that's the we're in this era of the sort of attention economy, and I like to think of this music almost like, I don't know, it's like the complete antithesis to that. It's the complete opposite, because
Yeah.
it almost demands people to slow down, to take a beat, to really engage with the messaging and the sounds.
Yes.
And the production process of it for me was like, and I think you kind of hinted at this earlier, but it's like a lifetime's of experience, you know, a lifetime's worth of musical production experience coming to bear on this project. And I can, as a producer and as a songwriter, I can do things that I couldn't have done 15 years ago or 20 years ago without the experience and knowledge that I built up over the years. So I think but it's also influenced by one or two really you know, much more contemporary artists. I mean, there's obviously echoes of Portishead, Massive Attack, David Bowie, Nine Inch Nails in there.
Yep.
But also Billie Eilish was quite a major factor for me in you know, in the way that her music is just so incredibly deliberately made. Do you know what I mean? So every single component has its unique space.
Yeah, like that. I'm not. My daughter loves Billie Eilish, and she just got the new vinyl. So my daughter's been a few months ago. She bought a record player, and she was like, "Look, I'm going to buy vinyl now," and it's becoming more. You know, it's accessible now. And I go, "Oh, wait till this record company has this huge sale day." I was like, "You're going to love it," but she got that, and that one song by her, I'll have it on my like electric area, or not electric area. It's Diplo's Revolution now, and it just goes. Boom, boom. I love the way that bass line kind of comes through. And that's the same thing what you have going on with, again, your new direction with the Shadowmaker, is it's like you're grounding yourself. You want to be grounded, because I think in life like this right now, people need this message, and that's the message you're delivering, is that people need to ground themselves. It's not always about the attention online. That's great. It's good to talk, because you can get to meet some wonderful people, like being able to talk to you for the first time ever after, you know, tons of emails between each other and tons of comments, but at the same time being able to talk. None of that would be possible without these screens. But when this camera goes off, it's about what we do with that time. When I'm sitting here after my podcasting with my wife having a beer at the end of the night, that's grounding ourselves. Without that, there's no that, and a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that, I think that's also why the music is the perfect vehicle. The way that I've made the music, I feel, is like the perfect vehicle for the message behind, you know, the messaging behind these tracks. And it's not, you know, I'm not really in the position of I don't like explaining my lyrics or anything, or this is a song about this or whatever, because I think once you and I've seen this with music throughout my career, but once you put something out in the public domain, it shapeshifts and it makes its own way out into the world. And you never know. I was thinking about this the other day. Smokestack Blues had just come out, and it was getting some quite, you know, it was picking up some decent numbers of listeners and stuff. And I was chatting to a friend of mine, and he was saying, you know, this is like, imagine where this song will be in 25 years' time, which is how long it was that, you know, Leave You Far Behind was released, or even longer ago. It's like, wow, that's like, because we sort of expect instant gratification. It's like, I need 1 million streams on it, or I need this or that. And that's not, this is like the equivalent of the slow food movement or the slow cooking movement, where people just, if it takes 2 hours, it takes 2 hours. It's like,
that's right.
Why not? I mean, everyone else is doing, you know, 15-second viral TikTok dances. This couldn't be more different than that. So
no,
you know.
No. And you could dance to this anyway, because your remixes are amazing. Like, okay, so the Heartland mix to the Shadowmaker is awesome. But man, I put in the Endless Maze mix to the House of Mirrors, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, And I'm just bobbing my head. And I'm like, man, I just want to like walk down the street. And it's like that. It's like a commercial, like where you do a quick spin and you do your heel up with the shoes, those shadowmaker shoes. You know what I'm talking about?
Nice.
And you're sitting there and you're just watching, and it just got that flow. And that's it. That's what we need.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I think what's interesting about that as well is that, obviously electronic music's been 90% of what I've probably released over the years, and for me not to want to come back and actually remix these songs would be weird. At the moment, at the moment, I'm trying to be more focused on sort of pushing the original versions, but I also wanted to sort of put those two mixes out as a bit of connectivity between what's gone before and what's happening now.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting, especially with with both tracks actually, is that music is not finite. Like when you write a piece of music, it's the beginning of the existence of that piece of music, and it will find it. It's like Leave You Far Behind being used on The Matrix back in the day, and and everybody and that's a good example of a track that just finds its way out into the world, and then suddenly it gets onto this movie, which amplifies it almost exponentially, and then it has so much reach into other people's lives, But what gets kind of missed in that, I think, is that when you go back to Metropole and you listen to the Metropole album, like at least 50% of it sounds absolutely nothing like that track at all. It's down tempo, it's neon ray, it's thoughtful, it's it's trip hop.
That's kind of where that's where it goes. Like just pop in real quick. You want to talk about that, and I brought it up earlier. Was the beat evolves to listen to that song? That took me back to the House of Magic, when the House of Magic at the end of his greatest hits CD, he did a remix to the house, and it evolved. The beat evolved like 20 times. That's what happens in that song. And again, I refer to it, but that's exactly what that CD is. That CD, literally the album, you could put it in, and it was in my CD for all these years, my CD player, and I can just relax. It still is, actually. It's never left my CD player. And it's always taking me back, always the downplay of the songs, the beats. And it's just always been a fresh kind of take of mine. And that's what you're getting at.
Oh, that's really cool, man. I mean, I think, like we were talking earlier about the Breaking Point album, and in some ways it ended up being creatively, it felt like a bit of a patchwork of stuff, and you could tell from an artist's point of view, I could tell that was made over a long period of time, where maybe we were second guessing stuff. We were, maybe we were thinking, shit, we really need a single here, we need something with a big chorus or whatever. But where it's more interesting for me is when I go back into the old DAT tapes of the masters, and like a track like Nobody, which on the album it's actually quite similar to the Shadowmaker stuff that I'm doing at the moment, but it's very personal. It's just a kind of piano based track or electronic sort of treatment. There aren't big drums on it. It's very kind of intimate. And then I was looking back through our old DATs, and there are two versions of that track. One version is about 10 minutes long, and it's like a track that would have sounded more at home on Primal Scream's Screamadelica album. It's like a dub symphony, and all these fractured voices happening, and the vocal line, and it's so interesting, I think, for us that we had when we were putting Breaking Point together. You've got this sort of 2.5 minute long version of Nobody that made it on the album, and then this 10-minute long epic kind of, like electronic dub odyssey of some sort, which is sort of sitting in the wings. And we could have made the decision when we were putting the album together to go, let's not bother with the short version, let's put the dubbier, more out there version on, and it just is what it is. Like as a musician, I'm always making music. I've always got alternative versions and remixes of this and that, and I think that's really cool. I don't think I don't think pieces of music are finite. Like you hear the Shadowmaker recorded
Mm-hmm.
as the version that's out on the streaming platforms and what have you. But
Yep.
now I'm getting ready to play it live. Oh, it
Yeah, you
now
are.
sounds quite different, right? And
You are.
then I am, yeah. And then you do a remix of it, which is 7.5 minutes long, and it's a sort of progressive, epic bit of sort of techie house or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just, the song is still the song, but it has this. It's
Yes.
almost like a metaverse, an expanded universe, and it just keeps growing and growing, and it always will do.
Yeah, you've always played a lot of, remixed a lot of your music and things that you've always did in the background. And at the same time, as you step forward, as you look forward to February 8th and in playing this album for the first time and releasing it to everybody, and then your limited levels and everything like that, this is giving you that next thing. I got a little nobody going in the background.
I
It's low.
thought I heard that.
So for everybody that kind of wants to hear it a little bit in the background as we talk over it, you could kind of hear what he's talking about, where it's kind of slow, kind of like right now where we have the Shadowmaker.
Yeah.
So dark. And that's again going back to those CDs, those albums, and driving all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because what I was saying about Leave You Far Behind, that track has so much reach out into the world, and so many people have heard it. But then for a lot of people, like if that's the sound that they're attracted to, and then they come and listen to the album and they listen to Nobody, it's like, what is happening here? I don't, I'm confused.
Yeah. But at the same time, you had beatbox burning. That
Right.
shit took it off because, back in the day, me and my friends, we would have a beatboxing and everybody would have their own little beat. Like someone would be the bass and something like that. And then when I first heard, that was actually the song, the sample I would use to start Bring the Pain when I first started, because it just had that whole thing. And it was like, coming back next to you. And it goes, doo-dee, doo-dee, doo-dee. Oh, man. I was just like, and just the way it get when it goes do that way that you have that hook going in and out, it just always excited me. And then Shockwave was the same kind of beat in that song, because for me, again, when I'm talking about these songs, it's to me what started you down that aisle, but also what makes you unique, because nobody's done this.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely, there are eclectic producers out there. You look at people like Trent Reznor, and Trent, his, especially now he's doing the cinematic stuff with Atticus Ross. It's like, wow, this is great, because you can just see the range. So there are people out there that do it, but people, there is a tendency. Like people find their sound, and then there's a tendency to stick to it. I mean, I think it's always been interesting to me what Radiohead have done, but in part because I have connections with Tom going back to college days when we were in bands together and stuff. But
Flicker Noise.
Well, yeah, and Headless Chickens, yeah. And Tom was actually he was the reason I got into DJing in the first place, because he was the DJ prior to me becoming the DJ at Exeter University, and we were just really good friends. But I think Radiohead are they're a great example of musicians that will not rest, and you're not always it's not always going to make you comfortable. If you're a big fan of the Benz or OK Computer, you may find things just became too off the wall and too bizarre and all the rest of it. But then there are a lot of people who just absolutely cherish that range of expression that they're willing to explore. And it's not going to be for everyone, but
no,
Like, unless you're Taylor Swift, you're not really making music for everyone, right?
No, no, and that goes back to what you said. You said straight up in this. You said you're not going to want to dance to this music. You're not going to want this is going to make you think. And I think that if you're not going to accept that type of music and you're always going to stay in that lane, then it's always going to, they're never going to be complete in my mind. I mean, not talking down on somebody that just wants to just listen to one artist one time, but how can you stick yourself on that one thing? Why not try something else? And that's what we got here. And when we go back to challenging ourselves and in the challenge, with the guys in the VGM music and going, hey, and then I'm sitting here, I'm having some of these really rocking tunes and I'm like, dang, I actually did pretty good. This was a nice episode. And then I kind of pop out, I go back to it and listen to it. But again, the music, the direction that you're going, the people, the influences that you've done, all of that. Who was it? Who was your biggest inspiration? Who was the first person, the first artist that inspired you maybe to go down this route or to be a musician, period?
Oh, well, that's 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 a difficult question to answer. I'd say that the first artists, the first band that I really connected with, I thought on a personal level, was actually Metallica.
Okay.
Like this is when I was a kid, and I was just,
Yep.
I like the first gig I ever went to was Motorhead. So I didn't, I was
Oh,
in it, I was in at the deep end, right? I went to see Motorhead play, and
that's
I think
wild.
I was like 14 or something, and my parents let me go all the way up to London on my own, and I just went to the gig, and
Wow.
yeah, just
No
and they were
cell
like,
phone,
yeah,
by the way.
no
Just
cell
say,
phones. No, and
have a nice
their
trip on
only
the train.
their only instruction was don't miss the last train home because we lived
Nice.
outside of London.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I remember, and I met a friend up there, um, and it was quite intimidating because a lot of their fan base were like, they were hardcore bikers, there were a lot of Hell's Angels there. It was like
Uh-huh.
Motorhead, England in the early 80s. That was like, and they just harnessed this sort of punk energy but put it into it's just,
Yeah.
I just loved it, and I love the fact that they weren't too sort of purist.
Yeah.
And actually, like around that time, Metallica were coming out with their first album, and then when Ride the Lightning came
Uh-huh.
out, I remember the album coming out and going out on the day to buy it, and
Uh-huh.
and it just meant everything to me. And then I found
Yep.
out they were touring, and they were doing one London show,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at a 700 capacity theatre, and I got a ticket to it.
Wow.
I know,
I
and it
mean,
cost me. It cost the equivalent, I think, of about $4. I think.
oh, come on. I mean, some people don't they don't know about back in the 80s. You could get some real cheap stuff.
Unbelievable. And so,
Oh man.
and it wasn't a theatre, so it wasn't a seated. Well, it was a theatre, but there were no. It was just a mosh pit basically,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I couldn't get any of my mates to go with me, so I just went up to London on my own, went to that.
Oh wow.
And then 2 years later, it was Master of Puppets, and by then I was, an absolute devotee. And
Yeah.
I still have my ticket somewhere for. I went to see them at Birmingham, and I was at university at the time in Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to the venue on the day the tickets were going on sale at 4:30, and I was like the third person in the line to get tickets, and my ticket is row A, seat 20, so it's like front row, bang in the middle, um,
Oh,
for that, for that show.
took
And
you
this
off, man.
it was amazing. It was £4.50, which is about $5.50, and
Dude, that's
their support band that night was Anthrax. So
oh. That's what they did was they doing I'm the Man with Chuck
yeah,
D at the time.
I think so. Yeah. And it was so good. The next day, I actually hitched down to London and went to see them again
Oh
in
yeah.
London. Bought a ticket from a tout, which cost me about £10 or something, and saw them
Oh
again.
man.
So
Dude, you gotta take it because now you'll never have that again. You
uh,
I think the one podcast let's do the Pot of Thunder. They're the rock band place I was talking about earlier in the messages. And I think the one guy has never seen Motorhead, and he's like, but there's been a lot. I have never seen a lot of those. A lot of my money back then when I was growing up and a teenager delivering papers was spent on wrestling events. Front row, Erie, PA, because Erie, PA was one of those original cities that wrestling would always come through for the WWF/WWE. So I was getting front row tickets for $30, $40, $60. I would go to work and the manager would go, I want to go get me 2 tickets. And he'd hand me $120. I'm like, okay. And we would just get that going. And then we'd be front row and my brother would be there. My dad, we went to this one here and it was billed. We got there and it was going to be live and it was Saturday Superstars. And we thought it was just going to be a regular event, 2-3 hours, done. No, my dad was starting to stress at 12 a.m. in the morning. He's like, we started seeing other wrestlers wrestle that already wrestled. And like, this is Tatanka, Lex Luger, Yokozuna, Men on a Mission days. And he's like, I got to work at 4 a.m. And I was like, Dad, I don't think you're sleeping. We got out of there at 1:30.
Wow.
Paid literally $40 for that ticket, 6 hours of wrestling. It was bananas, front row. And it just like that. So I missed a lot of rock concerts. So when my youngest daughter, that is, finally became of age and me and my wife and her could go see we got into Kiss for a minute because she fell in love because we went to go see Kiss when they came to Erie and she didn't go, but I listened to the music. She fell in love with the music. So then I came home from work, blah, blah, blah. Then we're going to see Kiss. She's being kissed out. She's got the Star Child. We're doing Halloween and we get to Darien Lake up here and we bought these tickets for $37 each. It was grass seats. And I go, look, we'll just get as close as possible. And this old lady was sitting there, this ticket scanner. She goes, hey, there's going to be a guy giving out ticket upgrades on the field. And I looked at the wife and I go, ain't nobody going to be faster than me.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, nobody can be faster. I was like, just go get the beers. And he goes and gets the beers and I run and she scanned our tickets prior. So she just opened her door and I went running. They put us 3 rows in front of the second stage. Paul Stanley was 10 feet away from us. And he pointed to my daughter and she just screamed. One of the better moments in life. And then I'll say, I think I screamed a little loud when I saw Bobby Brown in concert. I fanboyed Bobby, but at the same time, I mean, outside of that, what you described to me right there is what the true music means to a lot of us fans. Why, when there was a certain thing that took away a lot of privileges like that a lot of people like us that thrive off of that, build off of that, need that energy rushing through their body, didn't have it. And now we do. Now we're back. So reliving moments like that and being able to express ourselves and listen to the music that we love and grew up with and still listen to, because that's what it's all about. I mean, I am blessed to have you creating music still to this day, as well as my friend Mike and even the locksmith. I followed him for over 15, 20 years as well too. Look, not being able to get his music, but of course another LimeWire song.
Yeah.
But that is what music is. And that is what you explained to me.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of community, isn't it? Like some of my favorite shows on that. We did a 6-week tour with the Crystal Method, right the way around America. We did 14,000 miles in our tour buses. I think every show was sold out. So they were still touring the Vegas album back then. Mm-hmm. They were huge over here. Nobody knew who they were in the UK at all, to be honest. It was like they were over here. They were like they were like your equivalent to the Prodigy or whatever in the UK. Yeah. And we were really lucky to get on tour with them. We got on really well with them as friends as well. And and we, like, as a band, we absolutely kicked ass, at these, like, we really did. We had a live drummer. We were and he's actually playing on the Shadowmaker show with me, which is super exciting. But
that's
man,
crazy.
I know. And the Crystal Method guys, like, I remember about halfway through the tour, I was sitting in the tour bus with them one night and they were saying, this is like, we've never been pushed this hard on a tour by a support band before, because
Oh,
you guys are going out there and you're fucking killing it every night,
yeah.
and we're standing backstage going, we're gonna have to do something a bit special tonight, which was amazing.
Oh,
Um,
that special must have been in that video when you're sitting there playing the keyboard, dude. You were dialed, bro.
we were so by the time we got to that kind of like midway through the tour, we were, it was electronic punk music. It really was.
Uh-huh.
And some of those tracks that we were talking about earlier, like Beatbox Burning, we used to play.
Mm-hmm.
And on the album, that comes across as being, it's cool and it's quite mild mannered, but playing it live was just like, it was like a juggernaut.
Yeah.
But my point was just going back a couple of sentences. I was saying about some of the favorite places I played on that tour were the places that we didn't know that much about before we got there.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're talking about your town and what it was like growing up, and the fact you couldn't get music. Well, I remember playing in Omaha in Nebraska,
Uh-huh.
and we've done the San Franciscos and the LAs and New Yorks and
Yep.
all the rest of it, and now we're in Omaha. Everyone's like, I don't know what this is at all. And we pull into town, and we were playing at it was like a bowling alley, and they had the vans were all kind of set up down at one end, and then there's a bowling
Uh-huh.
alley here. It's like, this is fucking wild, because this
Yeah.
tour, we've been doing 5,000 capacity venues, and now we're playing here. But when the bus pulled into the parking lot, it was maybe 11 in the morning, and I
Mm-hmm.
swear there were 300 cars already there, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone had the tailgates up, and the music was blasting, the beers were
Oh,
flying, and we went out and we talked to a bunch of the kids there, and they were kind of, you have no idea what
yeah.
it means for us in somewhere like Omaha, Nebraska, to have
Yeah.
this music here. It's like, this is what we've been waiting for, this for months. And
Yeah.
how
They,
cool is that?
so when they remodeled the Erie Insurance Arena, their first act was going to be Tiesto. This is when he hurt his back. It's like probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. He only sold 575 tickets in this bum ass city. I was like, come on, man. That's freaking Tiesto. Like, if that was David Guetta or somebody like that, you'd be sitting there trying to line up because you want to hear sexy bitch or whatever the hell. And I'm just going, but at the same time, we're sitting here and you don't want to see Tiesto, but like you're right. When somebody like you comes through. So the only time I've ever seen anybody was when Hardwell was on tour, right when he was back-to-back Worlds DJ, right in the
Right.
middle of it. He went to Niagara Falls and played at the Rapids Theater. That's where I saw Fozzy there as well too, Chris Jericho. So that was a really awesome experience too. But I got to see him, Danik Dyro, and it was just the first time I've ever seen this wild stuff. So I'm sitting there dancing, and I went with my brother-in-law, and then one of our friends, his work said, you can't go, we need you in this other place. So we gave the ticket to this other guy, and there's these shirtless dudes, and they got this little spinning thing going, and I'm over here dancing, and this one dude sees me, and he comes running in and goes, hey. And my brother-in-law looks at me, and he's like, whoa. And then he goes, I like the way you rave. Come rave with us. And I'm like, all right, dude. And I'm like, let's go. And there's this girl with a Ghostbuster outfit, but it's cut scantily. We got the Yakuza on the side with the women jumping up and down on the side. I was like, this is fucking wild, man. This is my crowd. Not a fight. Not a fight,
Right.
not a problem. Body to body. I'm 5 feet from like Hardwell, and I'm sitting there like this, and I'm just like, nobody cares. You're all one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. And I hate the fact that a lot of the time, I mean, it to an extent, it's like economics, but a lot of the smaller cities tend to get ignored because, people want to do Madison Square Garden, and they want to do one night there rather than do fucking 30 nights on the road and lose money on them and stuff. But
That's right.
there's so much connection and soul to be had in those smaller cities because it just means more.
Yeah.
Oh,
go on.
no, I was just going to say, I always had it like I'd go and play. Like if I was DJing somewhere, like I was trying to think of a good example, but London's a good example.
Okay.
Massive global city, every
Hmm.
bit of entertainment you could possibly want on any night of the week. People are just absolutely spoilt for choice, and you could be doing a show there, and if you start losing people, they'll just go somewhere else. It's like, it's not kind of, we're this means so much for us because you've made the
Yeah.
effort to come to our town. It's like, we're London, we don't give a shit.
Yeah.
We're do you know what
It's
I mean?
just
It's like, impress me. So
exactly. And when you got all that competition, like you said, but it's not competition, it's the next venue. It's like, almost, you could say it's almost like bar hopping, but you're more like rave jumping or
yeah,
something like that. You're kind of just like, okay, I want to go here, I want to go here. And it's why, like Ultra Music Festival, why they have different stages. Maybe you
totally.
got, okay, I seen these guys last week in, let's say, Oslo, because a lot of these people travel all over the world when they go to the UMF, in Miami, and then they're doing, they're out there doing the Burning Man or Electric Forest.
Yeah.
They're doing something like that. A lot of people do a lot of those same things. And when you're popping, it's like, okay, I already seen this, so I'm gonna go to this stage and I'm gonna
Yep.
see someone like Danik. Like, even though Hardwell killed it that night, at the time they were pushing Gyro. Danik slayed, and that goes back to, like, you saying that you were pushing them, because it's like, you hear stories all the time, like, oh, that first band blew him off the stage. Like, when you hear people when they had Guns N' Roses under them, and then Guns N' Roses would smash, and then eventually, really fast, Guns N' Roses never, the main headline.
Yeah, totally. And we found that with the Crystal Method too. What I think was really interesting about music in America around that time, around the end of the late 90s, was that what the Crystal Method were doing at that time. I remember one of the big reasons why Busy Child blew up was
Mhm.
because it was used on a Gap advert, for Gap clothing, and
Okay.
it was on everybody's TVs at the time. It was just everywhere. So a lot of kids were like, "Oh, I like the tune from the Gap ad,"
Hmm.
and they would come to the gig thinking, "Oh, it's," and then what they'd be confronted with was us, these like British sort of electronic punks
Yeah.
making an absolute racket, and you could see a lot of people. I mean, it was because it was a sold out gig, so we always had a crowd,
Yeah.
and people would come, and they'd see our keyboards there and stuff, and
Yeah.
they'd all be ready for the sort of busy, like like the Busy Child sound alike
Hmm.
band,
Yeah.
and we just kicked their faces off. It was ridiculous, and you could see, like, there were people going, "Oh my god, this is not what we
This
were
is
expecting
different.
at all." But
You
but
raised a
then
great thing.
yeah, but then as the show went on and as the tour went on as well, I was the front man, obviously, because I did the singing and everything. But
Yeah, you did.
I just realized as well that, okay, like, if people don't know what to do to this music, I'm going to use this microphone and basically give them some instruction. And it might be as simple as, right, there's a moment in the set where all of the music drops out and we just have beats, and that's when we want people to jump. So you just tell people to jump, and you
Yep.
do, and people look around and be going, is anyone else jumping? Is anyone else going to do that? And then a few people will start, and then the whole
Yeah.
place just becomes a mosh pit. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is cool. If they don't know what to do, just give them a bit of instruction. So
Yeah, just kind of, and you have to recognize that some people don't. They'll just sit up there, like, we watch a lot of Twitch DJs, and some of them starting out. Of course, that's how, like, Mike is on that. And to bring that up, that whole era that you're talking about, that's Mike brings that up. I want to say DJ Infinity from down in Orlando
yeah,
got kind of introduced and said, I think it goes that he kind of introduced Mike and said, hey, you should switch to breaks and beats from, like, his normal bass and everything like that. The story, it's a little, because he mostly tells these stories when we're all, having drunk, we're all having beers, and he's enticing us, but he lets out a lot. Like, he brings that up, and he goes, breaks and beats practically saved my life. When I made that switch and I switched over to a lot of my music to being breaks and beats, that's where it is. So his last album, Another Dimension, he's working on his new one that he's actually releasing next year too. So that's
cool.
kind of nice that we get I get, that's where I feel like I'm spoiled. I get to listen to people that all these years and never have to change my flow. And
Fantastic. I
so
love that.
you're well, thank you, man. Thank you. It's what your music and what they did. So right now he's given us a little hint of his new feel, the bass. Dude, it's low key sounding just like your stuff. And I'm like, you see this? This is how people just move in music. They just become so much better. They're that next elder Jedi. And people want to know if Yoda ever experiments with the dark side. Right now, Elite Yoda is experimenting with the
Ah,
shadow maker side right now. You
I
are
love that.
dancing, you're safe right across it. And I say that we did answer it because yes, Yoda did have to. That's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing. I'm a Star Wars geek, man. I listen to a lot of books and podcasts because I did a lot of driving back then, and then now I'm just always alone doing things. So I listen to a lot of stuff. So it just to me, that's the true message in life. And I think that that's what we're going back at. That's what this podcast is about. That's why when I have a title, when I say bring the music, it's to bring the music to life to the people, to show them your side, to show them who you are, to show them that there's music out there that nobody knows about, or they may have never given a shot. But once they hear it and once they like it, you never know if they're going to go explore it. And when they do, they'll find everything else you've done.
That's right. I was just going to say, gee, if somebody's just discovering me as an artist right now, and there are a lot of people doing that through the shadowmaker stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, going back to the Billie Eilish thing, when
Yes.
she first put out Ocean Eyes, and people discovered that. I think she was 14 or 15 when she did that
Mm-hmm.
track. And you can imagine people saying, "This is great. What else have you got?" And there's nothing, literally nothing at all. Whereas people discovering what I'm doing, there's probably a lifetime's worth of stuff to
There's so much
dig into.
content.
There is so much content, and it's all kind of tempos and all sort of vibes, and there's some sort of cinematic stuff in there. There's even I've got this entire album's worth of really emotive electronic music that I wrote a couple of years ago, and that again, like, that's just on the hard drive because my dad passed away. All of these things, like all of these life events happen that just put it on the back burner, and it will come out. It'll probably come out here and there, maybe over the course of next year or the year after or something. But man, there's just every sort of flavor of music, and an interesting one. We were talking earlier about Smokestack Blues and how the video that I have on my channel shows the two different versions. I'll have to play you the two different versions of Addicted to Lies because that's even more radical. Like the original Addicted to Lies sounds like Korn.
Yes.
Like it's full on. It's full on like industrial metal. It's mental.
That's what you were doing when you were doing those teaching series, and when you used that and you came out with these videos explaining what you did with the Smokestacks Blues, and then of course Addicted to Lies, or what you have in store for us coming forward. You explain that that's the knowledge, that's what you discovered, that's what we're talking about, what you've been able to own and craft into a new beat, and to take that and slow it down or speed it up to have the actual play with that beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, like I said before, there's a piece of music or a song that you've written has lots of different voices, has lots of different ways it can make its way out into the world. Just like, for example, the Beatles writing Yesterday, song everybody knows and all the rest of it. Well, that could be covered by 100 different bands. It would still be Yesterday, but it would have 100 different tones and sounds and vibes and feels to it. And it's the same as an artist that sees the release of a piece of music just as a starting point rather than like the definitive, this is it.
And I think that you raise that right there, where I think sometimes that it's so hard to make music, that being able to make music and as almost like a muscle memory, kind of second nature kind of thing, and then to be able to play off of it allows you to be able to create that music a lot more effortlessly than other people, because they have people whispering in their ears telling them what to do. And when you take out that creative element from the artist and it shows in their album, and nothing like generic plastic shows in any of these songs or any song. We can always go, dude, Mike has an album of yours, and he told me the song the one time. He has an album of yours, and he was like, "I got something for you." And he like played it and worked it up, and it was a song I never heard. And I was like, "Dude, you got to be kidding me! What's the name of this?" And I said, "I'll ask him again, and I'll let you know what song it is." But he's literally got the vinyl of it. I'm like, this dude. And of all the people in the world, like, he's just like, I was going through my albums and I found something, Rob, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like thinking it's a Method Man or a Spice One song or something like that. And he busted you out. And I'm like, and he's like, oh, I'm just like, you motherfucker, man.
Damn.
I was like, you got something I don't have, man. I was so jealous. And I was like, but he loves it. And he pulled that on me with Locksmith Legacy. And I was like, oh, okay. But I got Legacy. But, just to be able to find mixes like that, hear mixes like that, just new stuff, and just have somebody slap me across the face with new music I never heard from somebody I followed for 20 plus years.
Yeah, right.
It's just insane. And again, comes back to the why we do this, why we listen to, why it's part of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it's just a passion, isn't it, really?
It really is. I don't want to take all your time. I don't know how much time you had or anything like that, but I did want to get into a few thank yous and stuff before we go on anything else we may talk about or
Totally.
indicate. But I wanted to say again, thank you for coming on and everything. And I think right now would be a great time to get a lot of your plugs of where people can find you at, so that we could just get that out the way and then end things accordingly.
Oh, sure, man. Well, my website, Simon Shackleton Music, that's simonshackleton.org. I'm on YouTube at Simon Shackleton Music, same with Instagram. I mean, yeah, just Simon Shackleton.
You could find him. So
you can figure that shit out.
So when you remade Where Embers Glow in 2021 from the original effort,
yeah,
the more when you talked about this throughout this episode, that how you evolve beat over time, that last version that you just did, that right there, that sounds really, really hard from where it really started to where it is now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's like sometimes I'll have written a song and I'll be and I'll hear something myself. Maybe I want to play the track out in my sets, but it just the way that I've got in my head that I want to use it, the sound that I originally made on the original version just doesn't quite. It's not really go. It's particularly with DJing. DJing is all about. It's all about storytelling, and it's all about finding context, like new contexts for pieces of music. So, I like to think of a really good DJ set as the equivalent of somebody writing a novel, as opposed to, somebody writing a sort of Instagram post or something.
Yeah.
It's the way that you create new context for the music. And I think in the case of that track, I was looking to play it in a sort of tougher part of my sets, and the beats just weren't, they weren't substantial enough. And that's kind of how that came about. But I think also that, like, the original of that was like it was an album track. And it was, it was designed to be more listened to. It was designed to be a bit more floaty and a bit less kind of focused on dance floor mayhem. So
the original version, it kind of focuses on that do in the background, whereas like the new ones got that. So to me, I don't know why every time I hear that, I always think of the Knight Rider.
Right.
I don't
know
why. Okay.
I can see that totally. It's the same. It's a similar kind of type of synthesis, like keyboard synthesis. So it's like it's a saw wave puts through a certain type of kind of filtering, but it's like the classic sort of Knight Rider, and also Knight Rider has that pulse to it, like that.
Yes.
Momentum based.
Yeah. So with your new piece of equipment you got that you've been posting about, totally fall in love with it, man.
Love that thing, man. Love it.
But that was an early Christmas present, eh?
It was. I mean, I absolutely needed it for the show, and it's the Native Instruments Control S88, and it's amazing. I mean, it's like I spent when we moved from the UK. I live with my wife in Colorado now.
Uh-huh.
When we moved from the UK last year, pretty much the only sort of bit of like sizable furniture or hardware that we brought over was my old piano, like full size piano,
Oh, dude, that
which
must have been.
which was a mission, and it cost a lot to bring it over. And
I bet. I
it's like,
bet.
I've got it here in my studio and stuff. And a few weeks after we moved here, I got a piano tuner in, and he tuned it, and he said, if you're really serious about playing the piano, you're probably going to have to get a new one because this thing is like on its last legs. So I'll try and make it in tune for you. And then I sat down to play it, and usually, like in the past, I remember when a piano tuner had been, I'd sit down at the piano for hours, and I'd just get so lost in the tones of it and the sounds and all the rest of it. And I started playing it, and it was so unsatisfying. Like none of the keys, everything felt like uneven. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a musician, but I know like when I'm off, like sometimes like when I podcast and I fought all night long at karate, and then I'll have to come home and do a podcast, and I'm all jacked up, and I'll be over my words, or I'll mess up or something. It's nothing really big, but yeah, it kind of throws you off. And then at the end, you're like, damn, why did the hell I do that? I got to do that. But whatever, it's already out. Just take the plays, go make money. But for you, you can't get into that let's say right side of the brain, the creative element side of the brain. Lock yourself away, go into that mode that you just described, because that torture in a way keeps pulling you back out of it. So
Yeah,
you to move over to something.
yeah. It's like it's a technical issue. So if you're playing, I'm a classically trained pianist, but if you're playing a keyboard and each note responds differently to your touch, it's going to be terrible, because you can't compensate for that. It just means that your playing is going to feel uneven, and it's just not going to be much fun to play.
No.
But as soon as I got this thing, I was like, holy crap, I could have basically bought two of these with the amount of money that it cost me to ship this damn thing from the UK.
Yeah.
And I suppose it has sentimental value, but I'm not really, I don't really attach much sort of sentimental value to things. So I'm not, I in retrospect could have probably done without it, but it fills a corner of the room. So
yeah, and you'll make it, maybe one day you might make that decision, but like you said, with the sentimental value, that's that thing there. That's that kind of, you could say, that vice, that if you feel like you might be out of tune musically or something, you might decide to sit down and play out of tune music to maybe knock you back into your sense of poison, killing a poison in a way. So that's what's unique about getting all the new equipment. Like I have this podcast mixer from, I think it's Mono or something like that, whatever it is, I don't know, but my wife got it for me, and the minute I got it, it was just like the greatest thing ever. It takes over everything that I needed to do. My sound quality went up trifold by hundreds of degrees. You could get that background, and that's where a lot of my older podcasts, which are crazy, you can still hear the old equipment. And then I think even my daughter, we went to this yard sale, and it had a phone selfie thing, but it was a microphone. So I'd hook this thing up, it plugged right into the bottom, and I was doing podcasts like that. And then of course now I have all this, and it's just it's a constant upgrade to make things a little easier to create, and just to do everything that you need to do, because man, there's so much that you can go across. Like when I see you playing, I'm like, damn, he plays, but you're like a true musician. That's what makes making music for you so much easier.
It is, and I mean, I am classically trained. I certainly wouldn't argue my case to be able to sit down and effortlessly play some Rachmaninoff or anything these days. But I did a lot of that when I was a kid, and I was a choral scholar, and then I went to university and I studied music and really learnt about like the history of music going way back to medieval times. I also majored in original composition, which was all manuscripted. So
Okay.
so all of that's been really useful. I started learning piano when I was 5, and I kind of have perfect pitch as well, so that if you play a note on the piano, I know what note it is
Oh.
instinctively, and that's it's a nice it's actually stood me in really good stead over the years when I've been doing my DJ sets, so I can instantly hear where the key tracks are going to align in key and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Because
yeah.
you probably did where you've went back and forth maybe with a DJ, not in like a competitive kind of way, but you've went back and forth in being able to actually recognize that is amazing. So that again, your innate ability is what separates you from the rest. Because
Yeah, I mean, it's different. I mean, different people bring different things to the party.
yes,
Over the years, I've done a lot of collaborations, or I did do a lot of collaborations with Meet Katie. He was like
yep,
a good friend of mine back in the UK.
hmm
We DJ'd together a lot, and we released a whole bunch of singles together. But the part of the reason why it worked really well in the studio is that I was very much like the guy behind the computer and the guy
hmm
putting ideas in on the keyboards and all the rest of it. And his perspective was very much like focused on the dance floor, and I'd just be busy basically making a bit of music, and he'd be away checking his email and fucking around and just being distracted. But then he'd be able to turn around and say, that's too complicated, it's not going to work on the floor. And he was almost always right about that, and he just had this a much more of a sort of big picture.
yeah,
um
kind of like a reality slap, and then you're kind of like, oh yeah, and then it kind of puts you in a different direction, and then
yeah
you make it work.
yeah, because a lot of the time as a producer as well, you get especially if you're like me and you actually really love all the detail work that goes
hmm
into it. um you can sometimes just get very, very lost in all the zeros and ones of, I'm moving this to here and doing this. And
hmm
it's partly why the Shadowmaker album was a real exercise in simplifying things. And like,
Exactly.
the one question I kept asking myself when I was making all of that music was,
hmm
is this necessary, or is this a distraction? you know
Yes,
um
exactly.
so
Does I got what you say there. So you talked briefly on the move to America, but you've been in America. How's the overall transition? Because we could be some crazy fucks around here. Football. I mean, football. I know you got a Denver team. They were just on the TV here a little bit ago. How's that all the, I guess, the acclimation into living in America as opposed to visiting or
it's
doing a tour?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in America over the last, 28 years or so. I've
hmm
been coming out here, and I've seen a lot of the country. Probably seen a lot more of the country than a lot of Americans have,
Yeah,
with the
for
amount of
me.
travel I've done.
Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't, a lot of things weren't that surprising, but I think it's quite different when you're visiting to when you're living here.
Uh-huh.
It's very, very, there's a lot of things that are very fundamentally different. Healthcare being one.
Yeah.
And just everything, like the basic stuff, like driving on this side of the road. And
Yeah.
you know
Yep.
um but none of that is, I don't find any of that particularly difficult. I find like driving over here is 1,000% easier than it is in the UK, because
Okay.
the roads are enormous, the parking
Mhm.
spaces are huge.
Yeah.
It's a car culture. Everything is, whereas the UK is still, it's based on a kind of medieval villages that have just expanded and expanded
Mhm.
over the years. So there's no space for anything, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a
I see what you're saying.
Whereas
See,
here it's straight lines. Everything is really quite straightforward. The
go
only
this way.
the only pain in the neck here is just the way that people drive. It blows my mind how insanely aggressive and over the top people are. I just don't understand what. I mean, I thought moving to Colorado, everyone was just stoned and
Right?
super
No,
chilled.
you're stoned and mad.
Mate, I've seen some of the worst driving I've seen anywhere in the world since I moved here. It
See,
just
this is why I
blows my
tried.
mind.
I tell everybody this. So I have this little skit thing every once in a while on my thing. I have things I call "Make Me a Jerk," and it's practically skits where people put you in situations. Your reaction makes you the jerk.
Right.
So in driving does that a lot. Like I can't take the no turn signal thing. I can't take I get people get lost, but if you get lost, figure something out. Maybe move to the side. Don't do some random shit like run into the sign. It's just like you're so lost and then boom. And I'm like, I ain't getting up and helping you. It's that guy, there's somebody right there. And I'm like, what were you doing? Like, when did running into the sign become the option?
It's
that
so
happens.
true.
It's like, boom. Yeah. It's just and we had where I used to work, there's this bar. And so here's the road and the entrance would be down here, but it was a raised entrance. So the cars would park right here. I can't tell you how many times a car would just turn off the street and be hanging like this, dangling on top of another car. Like you didn't see that was a drop. Like you haven't lived in Erie half your fucking life, and you're sitting here hanging off a wood thing, teetering on top of another car.
I know it blows my mind. There's down in town here where we are. There's this parking lot, and you turn into it. And then, and as you turn, it's a huge, everything's huge in America. It's a huge turning, and there's like a divider before you get to where the parking is. You go round the divider and then you go into the parking. And to almost make the point, they put the local government or the Department of Transport put this huge boulder, which is about 3 foot high, just right there on the corner. So so it's just in case people are mentally challenged and they just can't figure out what they need to do.
Yeah.
And I swear, like every 4 or 5 days, somebody would beach their car on this boulder. They would just and they'd be stuck and they'd have to come and get taken out. And the boulder became such a local celebrity that everybody would just take pictures of it. So there were just hundreds of pictures of these cars just like on this boulder. And then the local government said, this is causing too much damage. Yeah. We're going to remove the boulder. And they took the boulder away.
Oh, no.
And then that night, there was like about 50 people left little effigies everywhere. And there was a candlelit vigil and all this. It's like, what is happening?
It's like if everybody went and got a bunch of stones and rebuilt the boulder.
I know.
They're just like, we need this in our lives, people. I'm telling you this night. And meanwhile, we're sitting here like, well, at least they got off their screens for a few minutes. I mean, geez. Wow.
It's a 3 foot boulder. I mean, you can't like if you're incapable of avoiding that, then just hand over your license and be done with driving, because it's
just move on. There's something. Get a bike. Don't get a motorized bike. You might kill yourself.
For God's sake,
Did you see it? Because that's another thing. Like these motorized bikes and everybody's running around. And I'm like, bro, it's not that I can't see you coming or hear you because your thing sounds like shit, but you're going really fast, man. Someone's not going to see you dumping in and out them cars, man. You got no defense. You're down. You're literally the size of my tire, which, by the way, I don't even know how they get that low, because I'm not old, but I couldn't be like this. Like that's so hardcore, bro. Get on it.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So,
crazy.
All right. Well, I know that we could probably go for hours and hours, and we did go for over an hour, but I want to again thank you to the fam, like for even letting you get this much time away from them. And I know that you're a busy man headed towards February 8th. That's going to be here before you get to know it. Yeah. So I want to thank you again for coming on Bring the Pain.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a really good chat. So
always.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do this again. Definitely,
totally, man.
And one of these times, I'm gonna come see you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna come
let's make that happen.
Man, I'll keep my shirt on though. I'll keep my shirt on.
It's a deal.
All right, buddy. Much love, man.
Awesome.
All right. Always, everybody out there, have a great day. And always remember to bring the pain.
To it. Ooh, yeah.